Got it.
Welcome, Dr. Mitchell Roth, as many people know as Dr. Mitch. How you doing
Hello.
tonight?
Good. Hello, Krista. How are you? Good
Good,
to see you.
good. So you've done a few major things, written a book, put your name in for running for Senate.
Well, I haven't done that yet. I'm
Oh,
exploring that.
it's still to come. Okay. Well,
Maybe.
let's talk. Let's talk about what's going on.
Sure.
Um, so you're local, you're based in what, Boynton Beach?
Boynton Beach, yes.
Yeah. So what prompted you to write A Taxing Problem?
Well, I guess it's my whole life history has prompted me to do that because, I've always been inspired by the words of Robert Kennedy. You may not be old enough to remember Robert Kennedy, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
He famously said, some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream of things that never were and say, why not? And that really has been, my motivation for actually writing the book, A Taxing Problem. I don't know, if it's going to have any impact in the course of my life, but, I am now 72 going on 73 years old. I know I don't look that old, right? Right?
Right?
But in any case, one of the things that happens when a person gets into their 70s is they know that their time on this planet is limited. And we know it in a way that we knew it intellectually when I was 30, but now I know it in a visceral way. And so, I don't know how much time God will give me in order to make a difference in the life. But when I go, I want to be able to think that something of me in a constructive way
Mm-hmm.
to live on, after I'm gone. And that's why I wrote this book. That's why I wrote my next book, which hasn't come out yet. Has got nothing to do with the taxing problem, totally different book.
Mm.
But I feel like I'm kind of racing against time in order to try and make as much of a difference as I can for the benefit of others in the world.
Mm. Living every day as if it were your last almost.
I guess that's the theory, but I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't walk around going, oh, it's my last day, it's my last day.
Good. Okay. Um, Explain how you arrived at a 2% flat tax in your
Well,
writing.
yes, I mean, that's the fundamental part of the fair tax system, which I call the system. The main part of it is a 2% flat tax on a federal level, an annual tax applied against net worth. Everybody's net worth. You would report your net worth and you would pay 2% of your net worth. And if we did that every year, my research shows that we could get rid of all other forms of taxation in this country. And I've been around long enough to know that there are a couple of things that people universally agree with, almost universally agree with when I talk to them. One is that they're being taxed too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? The other is that we got to get money out of politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I've given a lot of thought to that over the years. And I started looking at the tax problem by using reverse engineering. I asked myself, okay, if we were to tax differently, how much money is needed by government at every level, federal, state, local governments, in order to operate and to fund the programs that government funds? And the answer came out to be something like in an order of about $4 trillion a year. Now, when I first actually started looking at this years ago, it was much less than that. It was about $2.5 trillion a year, but it's
Mm-hmm.
gone up. It's gone up. And that includes all of the costs of government, federal, state, and local.
Mm.
So then I asked myself, okay, if it occurs to me, it occurred to me, I mean, I became very conscious of the fact that we all benefit from this society, thing we call society, and everybody does benefit from what we call society,
Mm-hmm.
but we do it in proportion, direct proportion to our wealth. In other words, Bill and Melinda Gates, they benefit from our society a lot more than you and I,
True.
right?
Right.
So if we're going to have a fair way of taxing, we should basically be taxing wealth. And the question then is how much wealth is there to tax? And then, when I rolled up my sleeves and I did that research, what I
Yeah.
found out is that there is so much wealth in this country that we could fund that $4 trillion a year by only charging 2% of everyone's net worth.
Unbelievable.
Now, when I say everyone, you understand, I'm not just talking about human beings like you and me. We have a Supreme Court decision that says corporations are people, and in state law, corporations are people. They're,
Yeah.
creations of law, but we treat them as people.
So corporations would be taxed 2% as well.
2% of their net worth.
Mm-hmm.
So would trusts. Bill and Melinda Gates, they have a charitable trust that they set up that have about $80 billion in it. Well, that trust should be paying taxes too, because the only reason that trust can exist is because of the support that we allow through our government and through our social order.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take all of those potential taxpayers and you accumulate, look at them in a big pile, you find out that there is so much wealth that only 2% a year would fund that $4 trillion a year. Now, we have another big problem, though. The other big problem is we got a lot of debt. And it always bothered me that we incurred federal debt because basically what we're doing is we're borrowing money today and putting this debt on the backs of our children.
Yeah.
Which I think is fundamentally unfair, future generations. Now, there's two different kinds of debt. There's debt to pay for things that's an asset that has a normal, useful life.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's debt that's debt. When we borrow money in order to support the military, okay, that's not a useful life. That's just expenses of being in the world. But if we incur debt in order to build a road system, well, that road system, as we're constructing it, has a useful life. So it occurred to me that if we look at just, ourselves as the analogy, we don't like to borrow money, except for things like construction on our house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's an asset and it has a useful life. And if we pay it off over that period of time with that useful life, what we're doing is we're borrowing money in order to be able to handle the cost over the useful life of the asset.
And you're making an improvement.
And I'm making an improvement. And so that to me is somewhat of an analogy. So I would argue for the fact or the idea that no level of government should be borrowing money unless it's for the construction of infrastructure that has a useful life. And so it can be amortized over the useful life of that structure. Now, states, for instance, municipalities float municipal bonds for that purpose. They go directly to a construction project and they pay off over a period of time. But the federal debt, which is something like 22 or 23 trillion dollars today, that's not that kind of debt at all. And that basically is debt that's going to have to be paid by future generations. So I thought to myself, well, how quickly could we pay off that debt if we were taxing people in direct proportion to their wealth? And I found out that particularly when you add the other two aspects of the fair tax system, we could pay off that debt fairly quickly, and then it would be gone.
What's fairly quickly?
Probably 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Incredible.
It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got to be more than just the 2% flat tax on net worth. The other aspect is, I spent about 9 years studying the Old Testament because as a Jew, and when I went back to, find out about the religion that I was born to, I spent about 9 years studying the Old Testament. And so as a result, I saw a principle that comes from the Old Testament that says it's what they call the giving of the half shekel. And when Moses was in the desert and all of those people were in the desert, God said you should exact a tax of a half shekel for every person in the community. And
Okay.
in this way, everyone counted and everyone was counted. And so I thought there's an important moral, ethical principle there. Everybody in our society has to count. Everybody has to pay something. And there are a lot of people that have a negative net worth, right? No net worth at all. But
Mm.
still, they're an important part of society, and we should treat them that way. And so I came up with the idea of having a $200 per year tax on every person. That's just because they're there, just $200 a year.
Okay. In addition to the 2% flat tax on the net.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I calculated how much revenue that would bring in, and that's for every corporation, every limited partnership, every entity would be paying that $200 as a
Okay.
baseline, right? And then I also looked at another principle of morality that comes from the Old Testament, and that is that wealth really needs to be redistributed on a regular basis. And it's not popular to talk about the redistribution of wealth in our country for some reason, because people always look at it in terms of what they have. But
Yeah. They start
the
to
truth,
think communism.
yeah, whatever. But the truth is that nobody needs, to inherit more than $5 million, for instance. I think most people would agree upon that. Or say $10 million, right? Whatever number that you choose, all of that additional assets should be redistributed through an estate tax. An estate tax that I would argue should be high, like about 70% of any assets in value in excess of $5 million or $10 million per person who's inheriting it, right, should
Mm-hmm.
be taxed and go back into the treasury so that it can be used in government programs that would level the playing field for people that aren't born into wealth. Most of us are not
Right,
born into
right.
wealth, right? Now, when you take all of those sources of income and you figure out, what would happen, in very short order, something like 5 years, you could pay off the national debt and still fund every
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
level of government at the current level of government today.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second
Sure.
because people watching are going to want to know who drew this beautiful drawing behind you. So
Oh,
tell us about that.
this is the love of my life that I am, married to my wife, Vicky, now for 30 years. And I love her more today than the day I married her. In fact, I'm one of those people that actually got remarried to her
Aw,
for my 25th wedding anniversary.
that's nice. Yeah.
She's very talented. She's an artist, and she's getting older like I am. So her productivity is decreasing. But that drawing is a work in progress that Vicky has been working on. And I'm the biggest collector of Victoria Roth originals in the world. I got a lot of her work around the house.
Now, you're thinking about running for political office. So tell us about that, what it would be for Senate, and
Well, here's the thing.
what are you thinking?
I worked very hard at trying to get out the ideas of the fair tax system into the public. In order to do that, for instance, I maintain a website and set up a website called the fairtaxsystem.net, fairtaxsystem.net.
Got it. The fairtaxsystem.net.
I also have, you'll also reference to that onto a kind of a personal website called the onedrmitch.com.
Mm-hmm.
I also, participate in social media and continue to post ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But it occurred to me that this is a political season, and the best way that I could promote the idea of the need to change our tax system in this fundamental way, the best way that I could do that would be to run for office, because if I ran as an independent against our senator here in Florida that's coming up for re-election, I would have then a platform in order to be able to speak more publicly and to argue for the necessity, long-term necessity of us creating this radical change to our tax system. I also point out in my book that this is the only way that we could ever get money out of politics. Because in order to get money out of politics, you have to set up some sort of a system so that people running for office that have the desire and the qualifications to run for office could be adequately funded through tax revenues. And if it could be adequately funded through tax revenues, the cost for getting that funding would be is they would have to agree to refuse private money. Now, unless there's enough money available, they're not going to refuse private money. That was the same problem that Barack Obama had, and before that, the guy that was ran for office, can't remember his name offhand, but another guy did that as well, and they basically had to give up public financing because they couldn't compete, with the private financing.
Mm-hmm.
But if, for instance, on a presidential campaign, just to pick a number, right, which obviously requires a national campaign, if we funded candidates, the selections of the major parties, for instance, to run for office, and we gave them the ability to utilize government funding to the tune of, say, $200 million, if they didn't agree to not accept private funding, they would have to basically answer to the public as to who's buying them and why are they turning down this funding from the public finance.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be a strong disincentive to do that, and as a practical matter, they couldn't win office. The only way that we can get private money out of politics is to provide public money for politics. Now, with the fair tax system, there is so much money coming in from the wealthy, from the wealth in the country, that we could easily do that. Because if we spent $1 billion to fund different campaigns at different levels, well, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the $4 trillion that we spend every year.
Mm-hmm.
In case it's not entirely clear, $1 trillion is 1,000 billion dollars. That's a lot of billions, okay? So it wouldn't, it'd be a drop in the bucket for us to do that with the fair tax system.
Yeah.
What you could do is you could eliminate the ability of people to use private money to run for office and get elected. Because we all know that when somebody has to depend upon private money and special interest to get elected, they're going to be influenced by the desires of their contributors.
Mm-hmm.
Not by the desires of their constituents. Their constituents being the people that they being hired to represent.
Exactly.
That's why, I looked at the possibility, I'm looking at the possibility of running for Senate. One, whether I get elected for Senate or not, I don't care. If I was able to get any major candidate for Senate or for House of Representatives, those are the people that make the laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I could get any of them to actually make transitioning our current tax systems into the fair tax system, I'd be happy to get out of the race. I have no particular desire to become a senator or to run for office, except for the ability to be able to get this idea out
Ah,
into the public domain.
I gotcha. So you want your idea to be exposed, and you don't care if it's you or someone else who latches onto the idea.
I prefer it be somebody else.
You'd prefer it would be somebody else. Okay.
But if I'm the only one, I mean, I would be, challenging them at every level. I would ask people, well, why don't you support this idea? This is for the benefit of everybody in the country. I mean, I think that the principles behind the fair tax system, the fairness of it, the equity of it, the justice of it can't be denied. I've had, a lot of people, look at this over the years, and the people that object to it are the people that haven't read the book.
So the people that I missed the last two words that you said.
Say the people that have objected to it are the people who have not read the book.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well,
for instance, okay, there's one guy that read the book and he was so excited about the prospects, he contacted me and he said that he's going to push it to everybody that he knows, the idea. And if anyone is willing to commit to read the book, he'll buy them the book.
That's awesome.
Then when I communicated to him that I was considering the possibility of, running for an office, the Senate, on a platform of fair taxes, equitable tax justice, and economic justice, he right away, said, well, if you do that, you got a contribution from me. I'll give you $300 to, towards your campaign.
That's great.
Other guys said, I'll give you $100, etc. But that's just a couple of people. But the thing is that he sent me an email recently, and he said that the objections that he get, he detailed them. He said, for instance, sounds great, but it's just a pipe dream. That's what some people say, right? Or never going to happen. The mega rich and powerful are in solid control of this country and would never allow it to get off the ground. Or the fair tax system would be unenforceable. Everybody will hide assets. Well, all of those questions, all of those objections are answered in detail in my book. It's taken me 10 years to put this together.
Yeah, it's really thorough. And I can't say I read your book, but I listened to your book because I had the audio version of your book.
Right.
And it's very thorough, and there's a lot of calculations that you do to really solidify what you're saying. So I think, that's true. If somebody reads the book, they understand the whole thing that you're proposing, not just a piece of it. So you can't just have a knee-jerk reaction to it. Now, everything in society that causes violence, and this is part of why you wrote the book, everything that causes violence boils down to a question of it's not fair.
Yeah,
right, Dr. Mitch?
I wrote about that in an editorial that was published in the Palm Beach Post. And
but it comes out in your book too.
Comes out in my book too. It's really in the very first chapter, right? Before I became a psychotherapist, I was a lawyer. And so I've got a lot of background in economics, I got a lot of background in law, I got a lot of background in, tax. I used to teach.
You have a degree in economics, right?
I've got a degree of a JD, a Juris Doctorate degree, and my undergraduate degree was in interdepartmental social sciences with an emphasis on economics. So, I took economics when I was in college, but as a psychotherapist, one of the things that I've learned and has become really clear is that we all carry with us what I like to call an original wound. And the original wound that we carry I call it's not fair. It's the it's not fair wound. I think we all have the experience of complaining to our mother or father or caretakers, but mommy, it's not fair. Johnny down the street, he could go on his bicycle at 6 o'clock. I can't, it's not fair. My sister, she got to do it. It's not fair, And we all carry this it's not fair wound. Now, the thing about human behavior that I've learned as a psychotherapist is that most of us have not had these insults, these assaults to our psyche processed when we were very young in an effective way. And as a consequence, we actually carry these wounds from early childhood into the present time, into adulthood. And so I asked myself, particularly after, January 6th, I thought to myself, my God, why would all of these people get so angry to descend on Washington and try to do what they did? And the answer is because they all thought it wasn't fair. Their guy didn't get elected. They bought this, the idea that it was a rigged election. It wasn't fair. And I thought, well, a lot of people bought that, but they didn't descend upon Washington. So what's the difference between the people that descended upon Washington and the different people that also believed that, that there was election fraud or that Trump should have gotten elected or whatever, but didn't descend upon Washington? Well, there are basically two differences. One difference is that those people that were really invested in their life, living their life, trying to build a career, living in a family, committed and involved as a part of the social network, those people didn't run to DC. The people that ran to DC were the people that are carrying a deep wound of it's not fair. It's not fair that the blacks are taking, that there's going to be a non-white country. It's not fair that it's not going to be a Christian majority country. It's not fair. And the wound comes from the fact that their experience of the unfairness of their life is so painful that when they can project that experience on something political in the here and now, that pain that they suffer brings up such anger that they are willing to lose their head in the moment to do something like go and attack Congress in Washington, D.C. So it became very clear to me that anytime violence takes place in our world, it's not fair wound that's being triggered. Now, I worked years ago with a guy by the name of Dr. Kirby Alvey, who's the founder of the Center for the Improvement of Child Caring. And Kirby and his organization was one of the biggest proponents of parenting classes. One of the things that Kirby always used to say when he would go on TV, and he was on TV a lot about parenting classes, this was years ago, he would always say that if you go to the prisons, what you find is abused children that have, for one reason or another, been paying society back for the abuse and the neglect that they received in their families of origin. And that's really true. We know that to be true. So that doesn't mean that everybody that suffers abuse and neglect in childhood, becomes a violent criminal. But almost all violent criminals have been abused or neglected children. So it's a reason, but it's not an excuse. Right?
So how can we avoid another January 6th
we have to make
insurrection?
We have to make our society more fundamentally fair. If these people can stop paying so much of their income in taxes of various forms, that they can start accumulating some wealth of their own, and if they can see that the wealthy in this world are paying their fair share of taxes to support the government and the society that they live in, well, they don't have to suffer with the reality, the knowledge that life is not fair for them. It's not fair. And it's true, it isn't fair. So it's important for us to create a more fair system. The Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator, right? With the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The aspirational, fundamental aspirational ideal of our society is to have a level playing field for everybody. And it became really clear to me that there is no such thing as a level playing field in our country.
Mm-hmm.
The child of the crack whore does not have the same opportunities as the child of the Bill Gateses of the world. You know, Bill Gates's daughter is jumping horses in Wellington.
Yep.
What's happened to that children, those neglected and abused children, you know, that have been born to parents
Yeah.
that don't have anything, that don't have any means, that are dysfunctional in and of themselves. So how do we try and make a more level playing field as we start treating all children in the country as our children in the country? All of these children are our children. In order to treat them that way, we have to do what we can to give them equal opportunity. And the way we can give them equal opportunity is to adequately fund the programs that can make up, to some extent, for the terrible circumstances of their childhoods. We can fund education, you know, through college for free. We have free public education. Why not college? We can fund public education better so that we have a higher standard of public education. Public education after World War II was much better than it is today. You know, what are we doing? These are the things that move me. These are the things that caused me in my 70s to work harder than probably I've ever worked in my life for something bigger than me. And that's what I've been doing. And that's what I am doing. So I found out, for instance, if I was to put into play the idea of running for office in order to develop a better platform, right? I would have to, according to the Federal Election Commission, I would have to be able to give an affidavit to the Federal Election Commission that I have enough support so that there's at least $5,000 pledged to be available for my campaign. Doesn't seem like such a big hurdle, but it's, you know, it's a big hurdle if you don't have it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, right now I have what, $450 pledged.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
I'm a long way from it. But
So,
you know, I'm not going to get there unless I get there in time in order to have my, you know, to be able to announce that I'm running, you know, for Senate against our senator.
so tell me
and
why someone should vote for you and tell us about your background.
Yeah, well, first of all, if I get on the ballot, I would be a very, very unique candidate. My primary purpose is to champion the tax system changes that I'm advocating for and the public financing of elections that I'm advocating for. Beyond that, as a legislator, I view the role of a legislator to be one of attempting to represent the perspectives or the views or the desires of that legislator's constituency. So whatever my feelings, for instance, are on something like abortion, if the majority of my constituents, you know, want a law against abortion at 16 weeks or whatever it is, it would be my job to take that position in the Senate.
To listen to the people.
Doesn't matter what I think. You know, we have a representational democracy. Everybody can't go to Washington. And so as a result, it's the job of the representative to find out what is the desires of their constituency, the larger constituency, and work for that. And that's what I would do on every level. Sure, I've got personal opinions about things like guns and things like abortion and things like, you know, you name it. But it doesn't matter what my personal views are. What matters is to represent accurately as I can the constituency that I would represent. And in that regard, I would be very, very different kind of candidate.
Yes.
that's why I feel I would have to run as an independent and not as a Democrat or a Republican.
It might be a good time to run as an independent because we're so polarized right now, and a
It
lot
might
of
be.
people feel that they're in the middle.
Yeah, and
So,
if I were independently wealthy, I could just do it like our current senator did. I mean, he made
mhm,
something like $200 million by defrauding Medicaid when he was the head of that hospital corporation that he was in. So he can afford to do pretty much whatever he wants to do and to continue running for office and acquire more power to himself and help his own, feather his own nest and the nest of the people that he rubs elbows with. Most people can't. I would really be a citizen candidate.
yes, absolutely.
And
But you have a really interesting background, so tell me a little bit more about your background. And you don't have to work right now. You could be retired, right?
I could be retired
Yeah,
because I've got sufficient income coming in that I wouldn't don't have to work. I could just go play golf if that's what I wanted to do, or
right. But you
college,
don't
which
want to
many
play
people
golf.
my age doing. But no, I don't, because I don't know how much time I have left, but with the time I have remaining, I want to do what I can to affect some change for the better in the world. That's my primary motivation in life. I have two primary motivations: that and uh, to bring God's love to my wife. That's what I wake up every morning and I look at her and I want to make sure that she's taken care of and she knows she's loved and that she experiences that. I'm a simple guy. Those are
That's
my
beautiful.
motivations.
That's
But
beautiful.
yes, I have a very peculiar background because I grew up on Long Island. I've lived here in Florida, I think, for 14 years now, maybe 13 years, something like that. I went to law school. I went to university, Stony Brook University, during the time of during the time of the hippies, and
Hmm.
drugs and alcohol and rock and roll were a thing. And it's like I don't have any secrets that I would be ashamed or afraid to tell anybody about. I am in recovery myself from alcoholism. I've personally achieved and sustained a weight loss of almost 100 pounds over the last 30 years of my life.
Wow.
Um, um, I got into a lot. I've been hospitalized in 2008 for because of suicidal ideation, because my world was collapsing around me in the moment, and I thought I was better off dead to people than I was alive. I mean, there was at that particular time, there was all kinds of authorities were coming after me. The Los Angeles District Attorney was investigating me, as was the U.S. Attorney's Office, as was the Attorney General for the state of California, and I didn't have the money to defend this stuff. And and as I said, I became suicidal, and I spent a fairly long time. I've had a mental health crisis of my own. I've gone through things like electroshock therapy. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff. I've also, before that, I've gone and I've studied with Native American shamans in order to try and get a deeper understanding of the experience of indigenous people and their connection to the earth and their connection to the
Hmm.
universe. I then, turned my interest into studying Judaism more. And as I said, I spent 9 years studying the Old Testament. I've done a lot of reading about the New Testament. In my book, I talk about a lot of different religious traditions and show
Hmm.
how each of the religious traditions basically argue for the same thing I'm arguing for in terms of what's just, that those that have are the ones that should pay, not the people that don't have. So I mean, there's a lot of water under the bridge in my 70 smart years.
It probably gives you a lot of empathy because you've
Makes
been in a lot of different positions.
makes me a very good therapist,
Yes.
and I am. I'm a much better therapist than I was a lawyer.
Tell us about corporate welfare. Why is it a key factor in the fairness question?
I think everybody understands that our tax system benefits corporations more than individuals. And in that regard, it's corporate welfare. Now that's from the tax point of view, but other areas of corporate welfare is, since our road system, our transportation systems are basically maintained by government and the people, and therefore taxes, since the overwhelming majority of those taxes are being imposed on the backs of the poor and the middle class and not the wealthy, that means that that infrastructure, which is necessary for good commerce, is maintained or paid for by not by the people that are benefiting the most, which is the corporations that can do business in the world because of this infrastructure. We spend more money on the military than any country in the world per capita.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do that? Well, one reason is because our military presence enables us to maintain predictable and markets abroad for our businesses. All of these, we give subsidies to big agriculture. We give R&D, money and deductions to corporations, and they own the technology. We don't own the technology, even though we're paying for it. Well, all of that stuff is basically corporate welfare. So the incidence of corporate welfare are really too numerous to describe it. Everybody knows it's there, and it's part of what feeds the "it's not fair" wound that gets people angry. Why are we as a people so angry about society today? Because we all know that it is not fair the way we run our country. Corporations and business should serve people, not people serving corporations and business. We have that backward. Now, what I'm proposing is not socialism at all. In fact, what I'm proposing would level the playing field and create a much more free market economy than we have today. Most of the economy today is dominated by oligopolies, people that, in a few companies and a few interests collectively, operate in monopolistic fashion. We don't support antitrust litigation like we used to, back around 1900, when Teddy Roosevelt was around. He was the great trust buster. He was going to, prevent these monopolies from forming. Well, not only did they form, they've taken over the world. And we actually subsidize and support that. And the way that we can level the playing field is to make sure that these interests are paying their fair share of the taxes that it costs to maintain the society that we have.
How can people contact you?
Oh boy, they can get in touch with you.
I'm your PR person now.
Yeah, I have. I told you I have a fairtaxsystem.net.
Yep.
No, thefairtaxsystem. No,
thefairtaxsystem.net.
no. It's simply fairtaxsystem.net.
Got it.
That website has a place where you can put in, name, phone number, and an email address, which then will get sent to me. The same thing is true with respect to the One Dr. Mitch website. Although I don't advocate people using it, I have a website for Roth Mental Health, which is, the website that I use for my mental health services and my patients.
People might want that too.
There's a lot of background on me in that, that website as well.
Yeah.
But if anybody contacts me with a phone number and an email address and a name and indicates that they would like me to contact them, I'm happy to talk to them.
Great.
It would be great if somebody would set up a GoFundMe page in order to get people to put together the commitment to the $5,000 necessary so I could file with the Federal Elections Commission to run for office. I'm not looking to get paid to run for office. I don't think people do. You run for office, you run for office. But if at least enough people, small donors, are willing to commit $5,000 to support the campaign, then what am I going to do it for? It would be, an exercise in futility. It may be an exercise in futility anyway in terms of getting elected, because I don't know if I became a candidate if I could get elected. I don't know. But I sure could put the heat on a lot of other candidates that are basically just tinkering around the edges, that distract us with the political issue of the day, rather than talking about the fundamental pocketbook issues in America today, which is how do we keep more of our money and build some wealth of our own, and how can government get paid for by people that have the money, that benefit most by society, and that's of course the wealthy interest in the country.
How can people get your book or your audiobook?
Well, if you go to fairtaxsystem.net, there's a link to the book. It's also available on Amazon.com. It's available on Barnes
I've
and
heard of
Noble.
that.
Yeah, those are the only place you can get the audiobook from, is Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But other booksellers can also, provide the hard copy book itself. What do you call that when people download a book onto
like a Kindle?
Yeah, like a Kindle. So there's also a version of the
Oh
book
yeah.
that's downloadable. It's less expensive than a book itself because you don't have to print it. But those are also available on Barnes and Noble.
Do you have the book handy? Do you have the book within arm's reach?
I don't have it within arm's reach, but I could get it in a minute.
No, that's okay. That's okay. What we'll do is we'll tell people it's A Taxing Problem by Dr. Mitchell Roth, or just Dr. Mitch.
No, it's A Taxing Problem, period. The Psychologist's Prescription for a Just Tax System. That's the full title.
Oh, thank you.
The Psychologist's Prescription for a Just Tax System. Author is Dr. Mitch.
Got it.
Okay, that's my nom de plume. Everyone needs a nom de plume. I know as an editor, you appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And as an editor, it was kind of scary for me to make my book available to you to review, because I figured you'd pick it apart.
Well, I was listening while driving, so I didn't pick it apart. I just took in the information and was actually really impressed with your research, your thoroughness. I think everyone should read the book or listen to the book.
Yes, I think so too. Listening is going to be the reason I arranged to have an audio version is because I know from my role as a psychotherapist and talking to people, a lot of people do not read, but they listen. So that's why I had an audio.
A lot of people like audiobooks these days.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, I have you here, Dr. Mitch.
Well, let's see.
Your favorite quote?
Well, I told you what my favorite quote was.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Robert Kennedy's.
You did. That was good.
Yeah. I don't know whether, what, if anything, will happen, but I think it's important to understand that in life, we have to actually make the effort to do what we're passionate about, whatever our passions are. And it's best if our passions are about somehow how we can help others, rather than simply feathering our own nest. And
I agree.
This is a passion for me. As this is it's a big passion for me. It was a big risk putting it out there. I work every day to try and get people to read and consider the ideas of the book. I think it could be transformative for our country. And through being transformative for the country, it could be transformative for the world, because I haven't done the research to know, but I suspect that every Western democracy could come up with something similar and fund their government programs in the same way by taxing wealth as opposed to taxing income. keep in mind that taxing, it was famously said years ago during the forming of the early stages of this country, that the power to tax is the power to destroy. You've heard that.
I haven't. I'm more familiar with the, two certainties in life are death and taxes.
Death and taxes, but the power to tax is the power to destroy.
Oh, okay.
And when we tax income, what we are doing is we are disincentivizing work.
Mm.
And we are disincentivizing investment that produces income. And so we are tilting the playing field, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the tax, for instance, the reason we have excise taxes on gasoline, for instance, which is probably about a third of the cost of the gasoline in this country. The reason we have excise taxes ostensibly is to discourage the use of gasoline in our cars. But that's not working. It's never worked.
That's not working.
The real reason that it was done is to raise money for government in the form of a hidden tax. You see, most people, when they think about taxes, only think about income taxes. But income taxes is not the most taxes that's paid by the poor and the middle class. The poor and the middle class pay taxes and sales tax and excise tax, these hidden taxes. They pay tax when they want to register their vehicle and they have to spend $300 to register the vehicle. Why should they have to spend $300 to register the vehicle?
Mm.
The ability to drive vehicles supports business, supports the wealthy. Why should we have to spend, $200 to get a driver's license? Why should we have to spend, $25 to go see a national park?
Mm-hmm.
All of these things, all of this money that we spend goes to government, tolls, right? And when you add up all of the money that we spend that goes to government, most of that money is coming from the pockets of the poor and the middle class.
Mm.
Because after all, how many park fees does Bill Gates pay? How many cars can he drive at any one time? Right?
A lot.
So when we tax consumption, which is what sales tax is, what we are doing is we're discouraging consumption. That means there's less money available for people to consume. And we are a consumer-based economy. So understanding that every fee that government collects is a tax is important in understanding the fair tax system. Because I don't know how many people have told me, well, I don't pay any income tax. Well, they may not pay any income tax, but if they're working, they pay Social Security tax. If they're self-employed, like so many people are today, they're paying 15% Social Security tax. And they have to pay tax for, federal disability tax, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So federal income tax is not the tax that most people are paying, but most people are paying a lot of taxes relative to their wealth.
Yeah.
And as a result, they are living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to get by. And if that's not going to piss people off in the long term, in the long run, I don't know what will. We have to stop supporting, our economy on the backs of the poor and the middle class. And that's what this is about.
It's all about fairness.
And we're only talking about 2%.
Yeah.
If someone with $100 million can't make more than 2% on their $200 million, something is wrong with that. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course they can. It's not going to break anybody. It's just 2%.
Right.
And if the net worth goes down, then they pay fewer taxes next year. And if the net worth goes up, then they pay more taxes. And the one thing that cannot be easily hidden is wealth. We have an underground economy that hides all kind of income, right? Cash economy. But you can't hide wealth. Wealth can't be hidden. It's in the form of stocks and real estate. It's in the form of art and gems. All of that stuff can't be hidden because someone had to sell it. And if they sell it, they don't want to be taxed on it anymore. So they'd have an incentive to report who they sold it to make sure that person who now receives it has to include that in their net worth. You see, with computerization today,
Yeah.
checking on people's net worth is easy.
Yeah.
And in fact, the
Yeah.
IRS does it all the time. The IRS does it every time that there's a death of somebody with a lot of wealth, because there is still an estate tax in this country. So the IRS knows how to calculate wealth.
I hope they know how to calculate wealth.
Well, they do. So the supposedly the logistical obstacles in terms of actually making this come into fruition are overstated. It would actually be much easier for the IRS to focus on that and stop taxing income.
Mm-hmm.
Social Security could be paid by the general tax revenue. When I calculated $4 trillion a year of government expenditure, that includes the Social Security Trust Fund.
Which everyone is so worried that it's going to go away.
And it's not going to go away because the population won't stand for it, but it's ultimately going to have to be paid for by general tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the thing is that at 2% of the fair tax system, if it raises $4 trillion a year, provides enough money for all levels of government, including Social Security disability, you name it. All of that stuff.
Well, this is really thorough. It's
I've
been
done
really
my
a
homework.
pleasure.
I've done my
Yeah.
homework. One thing I know how to do is homework. I've always been good at doing homework.
Well, you did your homework.
Mhm.
Everyone should read your book.
I hope they do.
I'll put the full name of the book in the description by this video underneath it. So thank you so much, Dr. Mitch.
Thank you so much, Krista, for giving me this opportunity. And
Yeah,
so you want to stop recording and then we could talk a little further?
sure. Thank you.